11 minutes ago, we made a mistake. And I want to be very careful about how I frame what I'm about to tell you, because the implications of what happened at 11:49 UTC this morning are either the most significant events in the history of our species or a spectacular misinterpretation of physics that will be explained away by Monday. I genuinely do not know which it is. And that uncertainty, that not knowing, is what terrifies me more than anything else. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the universe, though we will get there eventually, but the beginning of this morning, the beginning of the end of our comfortable assumptions about our place in the cosmos. It is January the 3rd, 2026. The quadrantid meteor shower is peaking tonight, one of the best annual showers, which means millions of amateur astronomers and casual stargazers across the northern hemisphere have their eyes pointed skyward. The Wolf Moon, the first full moon of the year, is at 99.8% illumination, washing the sky in silver light and making it nearly impossible to observe faint objects. It is a noisy night, electromagnetically speaking. Yesterday, an M-class solar flare impacted Earth's magnetosphere, causing radio blackouts across the Atlantic and painting the skies over Scandinavia with auroras that could be seen as far south as Edinburgh. I mention all of this because it matters. The noise matters. The chaos matters. Because in the midst of all this celestial activity, something happened that should not be possible. And NASA's official position, released 14 minutes ago, attributes what we observed to ionospheric backscatter from the solar flare activity. I want to believe them, I really do, but I cannot. Let me explain. The Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex sits in the Mojave Desert, approximately 97 kilometers north of Barstow, California. It is one of 3 facilities that comprise NASA's Deep Space Network, the others being located near Madrid in Spain and Canberra in Australia. These 3 stations, positioned roughly 120 degrees apart around the globe, ensure that we never lose contact with our spacecraft as the Earth rotates. Voyager 1, currently over 24 billion kilometers from Earth, the most distant human-made object in existence, still whispers its data home through Goldstone's 70-meter dish. The Goldstone Solar System radar is something different entirely. It is not passive listening. It is active interrogation. We fire a 500 kilowatt X-band radar pulse at 8,500 megahertz into the void, and we wait for it to bounce off whatever we aimed at. Asteroids, comets, the surfaces of planets. We have been doing this for decades. We mapped the hidden face of Venus through its clouds. We tracked the tumbling rotation of near-Earth asteroids. We measured the precise distance to Mars within meters. The physics is beautiful in its simplicity. Electromagnetic radiation travels at 299,792,458 meters per second. The speed of light. The universal speed limit. If you know how long it takes for your signal to return, you know how far away your target is. If the frequency shifts, you know how fast it is moving toward or away from you. The Doppler effect. The same principle that makes an ambulance siren sound higher pitched as it approaches and lower as it recedes. 3i Atlas is currently 2.01 astronomical units from Earth. 1 astronomical unit is the average distance from Earth to the Sun, roughly 150 million kilometers. So we are talking about 300 million kilometers, give or take. At the speed of light, a signal takes approximately 16.7 minutes to make the round trip. Fire a pulse, wait 16 minutes and 42 seconds, receive the echo. Except the echo you receive should be weak, catastrophically weak. The inverse square law is merciless. The intensity of electromagnetic radiation decreases with the square of the distance from the source. By the time your 500 kilowatt pulse reaches an object 300 million kilometers away, spreads across its surface and bounces back to Earth, you are receiving something on the order of 10 to the negative 22 watts. That is 100 billion trillionth of a watt. The antennas at Goldstone are so sensitive they can detect signals 20 billion times weaker than the power required to operate a digital wristwatch. This is how we explore the solar system. We shout into the void and we listen for whispers. At 11:49 UTC this morning, Goldstone fired standard X-band radar pulse at 3i Atlas. This was scheduled weeks ago, a routine observation to refine the object's orbital parameters as it recedes past Mars's orbit. The object has been behaving strangely since its closest approach to Earth in December, with the trajectory deviation we documented, the bizarre albedo measurements, the coordinated multi-wavelength emissions. But this was supposed to be a simple distance measurement, one last ping before it gets too far for useful radar observation. The signal would have reached 3i Atlas at approximately 11:57 UTC. Light takes about 8 minutes and 20 seconds to travel 1 astronomical unit, so roughly 16 minutes 40 seconds for the round trip. At 1200 hours UTC, the return signal arrived at Goldstone, and it was not a whisper, it was a scream. I am looking at the signal analysis data now. I should not have access to this. Someone at JPL, who has worked with me for years, sent it to me 90 minutes ago with a single line of text. Brian, what the hell is this? The return signal was amplified. Not by a small factor that might be attributed to unusual surface reflectivity or fortuitous geometry, amplified by a factor of approximately 10,000. The pulse that came back carried more energy than the pulse we sent out. That is not reflection, that is not scattering, that is active transmission. But that is not the part that made me stop breathing for several seconds. The wave was phase conjugated. Let me explain what that means, because it is crucial to understanding why this cannot be natural. When light, or any electromagnetic wave, bounces off a normal surface, it scatters. Imagine throwing a handful of tennis balls at a rocky hillside. They bounce off in all directions, chaotically, unpredictably. Some come back toward you, most do not. The surface imposes its own geometry on the reflection. This is how nature works. This is entropy in action. Order decays into disorder. A phase conjugate mirror does something entirely different. It takes an incoming wave, preserves its exact shape, inverts its phase, and sends it back precisely along the path it came from. Every tennis ball returns exactly to your hand. Every photon retraces its steps through every distortion, every atmospheric fluctuation, every perturbation it encountered on the way out. In physics, we call this time reversal. The phase conjugate wave is mathematically identical to the original wave played backward through time. Nature does not do this. Ice does not do this. Rock does not do this. Dust and gas clouds do not do this. The only systems that produce phase conjugate returns are non-linear optical media, specifically engineered for this purpose, Brillouin scattering in specially designed crystals. Four-wave mixing in materials with third-order susceptibility, stimulated scattering in gain media. These require power, these require specific materials, these require engineering. The signal that came back from 3i Atlas at noon today was a phase conjugate return of our radar pulse, amplified by 4 orders of magnitude. I had to walk outside after I saw the data. I stood in my garden in Manchester in the cold January air, looking up at a sky I could not see through the clouds, trying to process what I was looking at. For 60 years, we have searched for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. We have pointed radio telescopes at the sky and listened for patterns in the noise. We have sent golden records into interstellar space as messages in bottles. We have calculated Drake equations and debated Fermi paradoxes and wondered if we are alone in a universe of 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone and 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. And this morning, we may have received our answer in the most terrifying way possible. We did not find them. We alerted them. I want to be rigorous about this. I want to be scientific. Because if this is real, if what happened this morning is what the data suggests, then we need to be absolutely certain before we say anything publicly. And if this is some elaborate misinterpretation, some instrumental artifact, some physics we do not understand, then we need to identify that too. So let me walk through the verification. The first question, could this be an instrumental error at Goldstone? No, and here is why. Within 90 seconds of the anomalous return arriving at Goldstone, the Very Large Array in New Mexico detected the same signal. The VLA is located on the plains of San Agustin, roughly 80 kilometers west of Socorro, New Mexico. It consists of 27 parabolic dish antennas, each 25 meters in diameter, arranged in a Y-shaped configuration that can be spread across 36 kilometers. It is one of the most powerful radio telescope arrays in the world. The VLA was not transmitting. It was passively observing a completely different target. But the amplified return from 3i Atlas was so powerful that it registered on their receivers as an unexpected transient signal. They logged it automatically. They did not know what it was until they cross-referenced the timing with Goldstone's transmission schedule. Same signal, different instrument, different location, 1,600 kilometers apart. But it gets worse. Murray-Ang, the 64-meter dish at Parkes Observatory in New South Wales, Australia, also detected the signal. Parkes is one of the most sensitive radio telescopes in the southern hemisphere. It played a crucial role in receiving television signals from the Apollo 11 moon landing. It has been operating continuously since 1961. Parkes is on the opposite side of the planet from Goldstone. The signal had to propagate around Earth's curvature. The geometry only works if the return beam was tight enough to reach multiple facilities, which means it was not scattering randomly. It was directional. It was aimed. And then 47 minutes after the initial detection, Jodrell Bank in Cheshire detected a secondary signal, the Lovell telescope, 76 meters in diameter, the third largest steerable radio telescope in the world. Located in northwest England, surrounded by countryside, specifically chosen because it is free from radio interference, 4 facilities, 4 continents, the same anomalous signal. If this were instrumental error, it would be the most coordinated instrumental error in the history of radio astronomy. Goldstone, VLA, Parkes, and Jodrell Bank would all have to malfunction in exactly the same way at exactly the same time, producing exactly the same signal characteristics. The probability of that occurring by chance is effectively 0. The second question, could this be ionospheric backscatter from the solar flare? This is NASA's official position as of 90 minutes ago. The M-class flare that hit Earth yesterday caused significant disturbances in the ionosphere. Radio signals can bounce off the ionosphere under certain conditions. Perhaps, the argument goes, Goldstone's outgoing pulse was reflected back by ionospheric irregularities before it ever reached 3i Atlas. This explanation has 3 fatal problems. First, the timing. If the signal were ionospheric reflection, it would have returned within seconds, not 16 minutes. The ionosphere is between 80 and 1,000 kilometers above Earth's surface. A round trip at the speed of light takes less than 7 milliseconds. The return signal arrived precisely when we expected an echo from 3i Atlas, based on its known distance. The timing matches the object, not Earth's atmosphere. Second, the Doppler shift. And this is where it gets genuinely disturbing. Earth rotates. The Goldstone facility in California is moving at roughly 368 meters per second at its latitude due to Earth's rotation. This motion creates a Doppler shift in any signal we transmit or receive. The frequency changes based on whether we are moving toward or away from the target. The return signal from 3i Atlas was Doppler corrected, not for the motion of the object, which we expected, but for the motion of the Goldstone dish itself. As Earth rotates, as Goldstone moves through space, the return signal has been shifting frequency to compensate. It is maintaining lock on the transmitter. Ionospheric backscatter cannot do this. The ionosphere does not track the rotation of a specific facility on Earth's surface. The ionosphere does not adjust its reflection to keep a beam centered on a moving target. 3i Atlas knows where the ping came from, and it is keeping its response pointed directly at the source. Third, the phase conjugation. Ionospheric reflection produces scattered, distorted signals. It does not produce clean phase conjugate returns. The physics simply does not allow for it. You cannot get time-reversed wave propagation from random scattering of ionized gas particles. So the official explanation fails on timing, fails on Doppler compensation, and fails on the fundamental physics of the signal itself. The third question, could this be a natural phenomenon we simply have not encountered before? I have been asking myself this question for the past 2 hours. Science is full of examples where we thought we understood something, only to discover we were wrong. Pulsars were initially called little green men because their regular radio pulses seemed too precise to be natural. They turned out to be rapidly rotating neutron stars. Quasars baffled astronomers for years before we understood they were active galactic nuclei powered by supermassive black holes. Perhaps 3I Atlas is made of some material we have never encountered. Perhaps it formed in conditions so different from our solar system that it exhibits properties we cannot explain with our current physics. Perhaps the combination of its composition, its structure, and its interaction with our radar pulse produces this phase conjugate amplification through some mechanism we have not yet discovered. I want this to be true. I desperately want this to be true, because the alternative is terrifying. But I cannot construct a plausible model. I've been trying for hours. The energy budget alone is problematic. The return signal contained approximately 10,000 times more energy than we transmitted. That energy had to come from somewhere. If it is being generated by the object itself, then the object has an internal power source. Natural objects do not have internal power sources that can be activated by external radar pulses. The phase conjugation requires non-linear optical processes. These require specific material properties that we have never observed in any natural astronomical object. Asteroids are rock and metal. Comets are ice and dust. Neither category contains the crystalline structures or gain media necessary for phase conjugation. And the tracking, the Doppler lock on goldstone specifically, that requires computation. That requires feedback. That requires a system that can measure the frequency of the incoming signal, calculate the motion of the source, and adjust the outgoing signal to compensate. Rocks do not compute. Ice does not track. Natural objects do not aim. Let me tell you what phase conjugate mirrors are actually used for on Earth. Military applications, electronic warfare, laser weapon systems. When you fire a high-power laser at a target, atmospheric turbulence distorts the beam. By the time it reaches the target, it has spread and weakened. Phase conjugate mirrors solve this problem. You send out a low-power probe beam, let the atmosphere distort it, then phase conjugate the return signal and amplify it. When you transmit the amplified phase conjugate beam, it passes through the same atmospheric distortions in reverse and arrives at the target perfectly focused. This is how you point a laser weapon accurately through turbulent air. This is how you track a moving target and keep a beam locked on it despite relative motion. This is the technology we are developing for missile defense systems and directed energy weapons. And this morning, something 300 million kilometers away demonstrated that same capability. Something received our radar pulse, phase conjugated it, amplified it by 4 orders of magnitude, and returned it to us with Doppler tracking to keep it centered on the transmitting dish. That is not a natural phenomenon. That is a response. That is a technological system doing exactly what it was designed to do. I need to go back further. I need to contextualize this within everything else we have observed about 3I Atlas since July. This object arrived in our solar system during the second strongest gamma ray burst ever recorded, GRB 250702b. Same direction of the sky, same timing. The odds of coincidence were already astronomical. At closest approach to Earth in December, it executed a trajectory deviation, 60,000 kilometers lateral displacement from pure gravitational prediction. Not radial outgassing, that might explain it away as cometary activity. Lateral, sideways, a course correction, its albedo measured at 80%. Fresh snow reflectivity. On an object that should have been heated and degraded by solar radiation. Its surface maintained pristine reflectivity under conditions that destroy normal ice. Its rotation locked into stable periodicity. No tumbling, no wobble, no perturbation from asymmetric outgassing. Locked rotation, like a lighthouse beacon, sweeping that golden reflective surface at regular intervals. X-ray pulses, Chandra detected rhythmic emission correlated with the rotation period. Every time that surface rotated through a specific orientation, X-ray burst, UV flickering, Hertz range modulation, too fast for rotation to explain, surface features varying on sub-second timescales, active, not passive, and now this, active response to radar interrogation, phase conjugate amplification, target tracking. Each anomaly individually might be explainable, exotic composition, unusual formation history, fortuitous geometry, but stack them together, gold colour, high albedo. Locked rotation, multi-wavelength emissions, trajectory deviation, phase conjugate radar return. At some point, the accumulation of improbabilities exceeds what coincidence can carry. At some point, you have to consider alternative hypotheses. There was a moment in 1977 that has haunted the SETI community ever since. August 15th, at the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Ohio, Jerry Amon was processing data from the telescope's search for extraterrestrial signals. He was looking at printouts of signal intensity, columns of letters and numbers representing the strength of radio emissions from different parts of the sky. And then he saw a signal that spiked so far above the background noise that it went off their scale. He circled it on the printout and wrote a single word in the margin, wow. The wow signal lasted 72 seconds. It was narrowband, centered precisely on the hydrogen line at 1420 megahertz, exactly where you would transmit if you wanted to be heard, because that is a naturally quiet frequency. And every civilization that studies radio astronomy knows about it. The signal strength was 30 times the background noise. It came from the direction of Sagittarius, near the galactic center. It never repeated. Decades of follow-up observations found nothing. We have never explained it. We have never detected anything like it since. And here is what has been making my skin crawl since this morning. 3I Atlas approached us from the direction of Sagittarius. Right ascension, 19 hours. Declination, negative 27 degrees. The same region of sky. Not exactly the same coordinates as the WOW signal, but the same general direction. If you were going to send a probe toward a star system you had previously signaled, the probe would approach from the same direction as your signal. Radio waves travel at light speed. A physical probe, even one travelling at a significant fraction of light speed, would take much longer to arrive. The WOW signal was 49 years ago. If something was travelling toward us at 10% of light speed, it would cover roughly 1.4 parsecs per century. From nearby stars in the Sagittarius direction, the timing could work. I am speculating now. This is not science. This is pattern matching and coincidence hunting, and I know that. But when everything else about this object defies natural explanation, when it just demonstrated active electronic countermeasures in response to our radar, when it is tracking our facilities and maintaining lock as Earth rotates, at what point do we start taking the alternative hypothesis seriously? Here is what we know, verified across multiple instruments and facilities. At 11:49 UTC on January 3rd, 2026, the Goldstone Solar System radar transmitted a standard X-band pulse toward the interstellar object designated 3I Atlas. At 1200 hours UTC, a return signal arrived. This signal was phase conjugated, amplified by approximately 4 orders of magnitude, and Doppler corrected to track the motion of the Goldstone facility. The same signal was independently detected by the Very Large Array in New Mexico, Murray-Yang at Parkes Observatory in Australia, and the Lovell Telescope at Jodrell Bank in England. The signal characteristics are inconsistent with ionospheric backscatter, with natural reflection from any known material, and with any passive physical process. The signal characteristics are consistent with active retransmission by a system capable of phase conjugation, signal amplification, and target tracking. I want to talk about what this means. Not the technical implications, not the scientific significance, but what it means for us, for humanity, for our understanding of our place in the universe. We have always imagined first contact as something we would seek, something we would achieve through our cleverness, our technology, our curiosity. We would find them, we would reach out, we would make the first move. But that is not what happened this morning. We've been passively emitting radio signals into space for a century. Marconi's first transatlantic transmission in 1901, our television broadcasts, our radar, our military communications, an expanding bubble of electromagnetic noise announcing our presence to anyone listening within 100 light years. And something was listening. 3I Atlas arrived in our solar system 7 months ago. It made its closest approach to Earth in December. It changed course in a way that natural objects do not change course. And it is now heading toward Jupiter, aligned for optimal gravitational assist, positioned to accelerate out of our solar system faster than it arrived. But first, it responded to our ping. It demonstrated that it knows we are here. It knows where our facilities are. It can track them. It can target them. This is not the benevolent first contact of science fiction. This is not a greeting or an invitation to join the galactic community. This is reconnaissance. This is target acquisition. This is what you do when you want to know the capabilities and location of a potential, what? Threat? Resource? Something to observe? Something to catalogue? I do not know. I cannot know. The gulf between us and whatever made 3I Atlas is so vast that I cannot even guess at its motivations. Trying to understand its intentions would be like an ant trying to understand the intentions of the human who just noticed it. But I know this. We poked the bear. We shouted into the dark. And something in the dark just turned to look at us. Let me tell you what happens next. Goldstone is scheduled to transmit again in 6 hours. The question being debated right now in secure rooms at JPL and NASA headquarters and probably several other facilities I do not have clearance to know about is whether to proceed with that transmission. If we ping it again, what does it do? If it was asleep, dormant, waiting for something to trigger its activation sequence, have we now fully awakened it? If it can track our radar facilities, can it track other things? Our communication satellites, our GPS network, our cities. I am not a military strategist. I am a physicist. I study particles and fields and the fundamental laws that govern the universe. But I know enough about game theory to understand that we are now in a situation where we have incomplete information about an entity whose capabilities vastly exceed our own and whose intentions are completely unknown. The rational response to such a situation is extreme caution. But here is what terrifies me most. We cannot hide. We cannot take back the last century of radio emissions. We cannot recall the radar pulse we sent this morning. The information is out there, propagating through space at the speed of light. Even if we went radio silent right now, shut down every transmitter on Earth, the evidence of our existence is already decades ahead of us, washing over star system after star system. And something already knew we were here. Something already decided to send a probe. Something arrived months ago and has been observing us, testing us, waiting. Waiting for what? The December trajectory deviation aligned, 3I Atlas for a Jupiter flyby in March, optimal geometry for gravitational assist. If it makes another course correction at Jupiter, that is not coincidence. That is navigation. That is intent. And we will be watching. Every telescope that can track it will be watching. James Webb, Chandra, Hubble, the VLA, Parkes, Goldstone, Jodrell Bank. We will have every instrument we possess pointed at this object as it passes through the Jupiter system. If it maneuvers again, if it demonstrates controlled trajectory modification a second time, then the debate ends. Once is an anomaly, twice is a pattern. And natural objects do not have patterns of deliberate course correction. I started by saying we made a mistake this morning. I want to reconsider that framing. Perhaps we did not make a mistake. Perhaps this was inevitable. Perhaps any technological civilization that survives long enough, that develops radar and radio astronomy and the curiosity to point these instruments at passing interstellar objects, will eventually trigger a response from whatever is out there. Perhaps this is a test, a filter. One of the great filters that might explain the Fermi paradox, the silence of a universe that should be teeming with intelligent life. How a civilization responds to first contact, to the sudden knowledge that they are not alone and not the most advanced presence in their cosmic neighborhood, might determine whether that civilization survives. If so, then the next few months are the most important in human history, not because of what 3i Atlas will do, but because of what we will do, how we respond. Whether we can coordinate globally, share information, act rationally in the face of the greatest unknown we have ever encountered, or whether we panic, fragment, turn on each other, prove that we are not ready. I have been a scientist for 40 years. I have spent my career marvelling at the elegance of the laws that govern our universe, at the intricate machinery of particles and forces that give rise to stars and planets and eventually to thinking beings who can look up at the night sky and ask why. I always believed that if we ever found evidence of intelligence beyond Earth, it would be the greatest moment in human history, the confirmation that we are not alone, the ultimate answer to the ultimate question. I did not expect it to feel like this. I did not expect the cold knot of dread in my stomach. I did not expect to look at the sky and see not wonder, but threat. Because here is what I understand now, in a way I did not understand yesterday. The universe is not indifferent to us. Something out there has noticed us, and we have no idea what happens next. March 2026, Jupiter encounter. 87 days from now. Either 3i Atlas follows pure gravitational trajectory, takes its slingshot around Jupiter and accelerates out of our solar system on a calculable path that we can track until it fades from view, or it manoeuvres again. If it manoeuvres, everything changes. Every assumption we have made about our safety, our isolation, our significance in the cosmic order comes into question, and we will be watching. Every clear night, every available instrument, every wavelength we can detect. Because 11 minutes ago, we learned something that cannot be unlearned. We sent a signal into the void, expecting silence, and something answered. It knows we are here now, and whatever happens next, there is no going back. The question is no longer whether we are alone in the universe. The question is what we are going to do about it. 87 days until Jupiter, 6 hours until the next scheduled transmission, if they decide to proceed. The universe just changed, and we are only beginning to understand how much. I need to end this with something, some conclusion, some frame that makes sense of what I have just told you, but I do not have one. All I have is this: the laws of physics that I have spent my life studying, the beautiful equations that describe how particles interact and how waves propagate and how energy transforms from one form to another. Those laws still hold. They are still true. The universe is still governed by mathematics. But somewhere in that mathematics, in the vast solution space of what is physically possible, there is room for things we have never imagined. Intelligence that did not arise on Earth. Technology that makes ours look like stone tools. Purposes we cannot fathom. And now we know, with as close to certainty as science allows, that at least one of those possibilities is real. Something is out there. Something is here. Something knows we exist and has responded to our presence. The Quadrantids meteor shower is still peaking tonight. The Wolf Moon is still washing the sky in silver light. Earth is still rotating, carrying Goldstone and the VLA and Parkes and Jodrell Bank through their eternal circuits around our axis. Everything looks the same as it did yesterday, but nothing is the same. Nothing will ever be the same again. I am going to transmit this recording now. I do not know if it will be suppressed. I do not know if someone will decide that public knowledge of what happened this morning is too dangerous to allow, but I believe that people have a right to know that if our species is facing something unprecedented, we should face it together with full knowledge of what we are dealing with. Watch the sky tonight. Watch the meteor shower. Look up at the same moon that humans have looked up at for 300,000 years. And know that somewhere out there, past the moon, past Mars, past the asteroid belt, something is watching us back. 11 minutes ago, we learned that we are not alone. And the universe is not as empty or as safe as we thought.